Hurricane Ian is strengthening in the Caribbean Sea. Good morning, I'm Mike Nasa with this 11 a.m. Monday morning update on dangerous Hurricane Ian. There it is in the Western Caribbean, getting better organized, looking very impressive. The outflow expanding there in all quadrants, looking like it's curling up an eye. It's a Category 1, forecast to become a Category 4 in the Caribbean, in the southeast Gulf of Mexico, and then making landfall in the Caribbean island of Cuba as a strong hurricane over the next 24 hours. We also have another feature out here in the Atlantic. This is an invest we've been watching. This could be a tropical storm, but it'll probably stay out. The next name is Julia. And then we have another good wave approaching the islands. But the focus is going to be on Hurricane Ian throughout the next several days as it moves up towards Florida. Now here's the latest as of 11 a.m. Eastern Time from the National Hurricane Center. Hurricane Ian was at 19.1 north, 82.7 west, winds of 80, so it is a Category 1 hurricane, and the pressure is down now to 980 millibars, so it's 20 millibars lower than it was yesterday, and it keeps dropping. It's moving northwest at 13, and this should gradually become north-northwest as it makes landfall in Cuba overnight tonight as a strengthening hurricane into a major hurricane. We obviously have a hurricane warning out for western Cuba, including the Isle of Youth, or as they call it now, the Isle of Juventude. I don't know when they changed that. It used to be called the Isle of Youth. And then we also have a hurricane warning for Grand Cayman Island, and that's because you are in tropical storm force conditions right now, but you could get into some hurricane winds. You can't risk that. Tropical storm warnings are in effect for other areas here of central Cuba, including La Habana, as well as the lower Florida Keys from the 7 Mile Bridge west to the Dry Tortugas in Key West. And we also have a hurricane watch now from Inglewood to the Anclote River, including Tampa Bay. So you guys are under a hurricane watch, to say nothing of the tropical storm watch southward down the coastline of Florida. The forecast track does get complicated after Tuesday because it's looking like this thing's going to slow down. Look at the motion here. This is Tuesday night, Wednesday night, Thursday night, Friday night. Still just drenching Florida. So this one's definitely going to be a water problem more than a wind, but a major hurricane offshore weakening is still a problem. We don't know how much it'll weaken or how strong it'll be before it weakens. What if it's a Category 4 and then falls apart right as it hits? It could build up a storm surge of a Category 4 hurricane. We just don't know. The forecast models have been doing the windshield wiper thing. Yesterday they were all to the west and then they moved back east. Today they were east and now they're moving back west. They seem to be somewhere between the Big Bend area here, Cedar Key, all the way down to Charlotte Harbor, that region there, which puts areas like Sarasota, Tampa at the highest risk of landfall. But again, this is going to be an expanding wind field and a lot of far-reaching impacts across the entire state. But right now, we just cannot pin down an official landfall point. Like Joe Bastardi said this morning on the radio, wait until it gets into the Gulf after Cuba, and then we'll have maybe a better idea. But right now, it looks like that trough is going to drag it, but not pick it up all the way, and it's going to have very weak steering currents, and that could mean a lot of flood potential there across Florida. This is the GFS model, and this is not good as far as rainfall is concerned. Take a look at this. It brings Hurricane Ian over the western tip of Cuba, becomes a very dangerous major hurricane, but it basically stops there for a good 24 hours just offshore Tampa before making landfall. So it doesn't make landfall as a major hurricane. It weakens probably to at least a Category 2. But look at this. This is Wednesday, Thursday, then this is Friday, then Saturday. So it's taking 4 days to traverse the eastern Gulf there, and that is just very, very bad news. I'm going to tell you this, the European ain't much better. Remember yesterday this thing was heading right into southwest Florida. It keeps it offshore all the way through Friday. It brings it across western Cuba just like the GFS, but then it stays further offshore. Now this would be good news keeping the strongest winds away from Tampa and the coastline, but look at the pummeling of water and rain there along the west coast of Florida. That just complicates things even more. So we just can't tell right now, other than it's going to make landfall in Florida, and it's definitely going to slow down as it approaches the coast. But the exact landfall point and how strong, we just don't know right now. Look at this beautiful satellite imagery. Oh, what a good-looking developing hurricane bubbling there, very foreboding. It's twisting up here. We're still not entirely closed with the eye wall. It hasn't popped out a well-defined eye. But see these clouds here fanning away? That's the ventilation, the exhaust from the hurricane. And then you have the counterclockwise circulation spinning there. Very, very impressive as we get that look to it. A saw blade. This thing's going to take off. The radar out of Cuba, we do have some rainfall beginning along the south coast, but we're not seeing the eye yet. It's still too far away. Some heavy showers here off for any mariners there off of Key West near the Dry Tortugas. I would stay out of the water or get those boats tied up if you're in areas there, the Keys or the islands up near Marco. You guys are going to have higher and higher swells. I showed you that satellite imagery, and the anticyclone's a little bit to the south of the direct center, but it's still giving it good outflow, especially off towards the north and northeast. However, the wind shear increasing from that trough dragging on it, as well as cooler, dry air, it's going to be very cold for the southern U.S. For this time of year. It's an unseasonably strong cold air blast. That could suck into the hurricane as it pulls towards Florida and weaken the winds. But again, the water is the main problem. Here's the storm surge forecast right now. And we do have a storm surge watch from the Florida Keys all the way west to Key West, including Dry Tortugas, Florida Bay. And we also have a storm surge watch from Ancloak River south to Card Sound Bridge, including Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay, 5 to 10 feet of water rise is predicted right now, and that also goes from the Ancloak River down to the middle of Longboat Key. And then we have 5 to 8 down to Inglewood and 4 to 7 here to Charlotte Harbor. Remember, that onshore flow around the hurricane is what will push water in. So if this thing's a Category 4 sitting right here, hopefully it would be weaker by then, but what if? And it has that onshore flow, you would have a water pileup. Very bad news there in the west coast of Florida. This area, like I mentioned in the update yesterday, is very susceptible to high storm surge. Here's the rainfall forecast. Now, this is going to probably increase 20 to 25 inches in some areas there. If the center stays offshore, some of the heavier rain may stay offshore, but again, we're talking drenched. I mean, this is 4 to 10 inches across most of the peninsula, going all the way up to Jacksonville, and this is just through Thursday. If this thing's still sitting in Georgia on Saturday, that's just going to drag and prolong the rainfall across the state of Florida. And right now we do have at least a moderate flood threat, including Orlando. So you guys in the middle of the state, don't think this thing's not going to affect you. Tallahassee, you're at a marginal flood risk. Do not think this won't affect you either. Now, we've been talking about Hurricane Charlie 2004, Hurricane Irma 2017. We haven't talked about Hurricane Easy. Back in 1950, this was Hurricane Easy, developed in the Caribbean, hit western Cuba. It came up, it was a Category 3, a major hurricane. It made landfall, it started moving very slowly, and it made landfall near Cedar Key, Florida as a Category 3, but it stopped, moved towards Tampa, stopped again, moved up, hit Cedar Key, stopped, did a counterclockwise loop back offshore, moved back onshore. It dropped up to 45 inches of rain in Yankeetown. Some of the worst rainfall we've ever seen in the United States, let alone in Florida. And this was in September of 1950. Even into Georgia they had heavy rain. It was very, very nasty with the flooding. We could hope we don't get something like Easy, because those guys back in 1950 probably pulled their hair out trying to track this thing as it paralleled the coast, stopped, moved around, dangled, stopped, looped around. If Ian does something like Easy, that would be a real pain. Right now, the forecast has Cuba next in line of fire for this storm as a strengthening hurricane. It's going to be very, very dangerous. Should be a major hurricane in the Gulf of Mexico and then make landfall in Florida. But again, anybody from Apalachicola all the way down to Naples, overlook your hurricane plans, look and see if you're in an evacuation zone, and listen to local officials. I'm Mike Naso with the latest on Hurricane Ian. I'm going to be back with continuing coverage over the next couple of days as we watch Ian strengthen into a major hurricane, move into the southeast Gulf, and take aim at the state of Florida. It's going to be a wet week ahead. Stay tuned for further updates.